Hey everyone, thank you guys for being here. Today we're doing session number 4 and we're going to talk about coming out. So what I would like to do for the opening circle is just get everyone to go around, share their pronouns and name if they feel comfortable, and then answer the question, what does coming out mean to you? So would anyone like to go first?
I'm cool to go first.
Yeah.
My name's Callie. My pronoun are she, her, hers. And when I think of coming out, I think of acknowledging who you are in that moment in time.
Hi everyone, my name is Alicia and I use any pronouns interchangeably. And coming out to me kind of means disclosing things about yourself to others that they may not know.
My name is Annalise. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And when I think about coming out, I think about it as a non-necessity, as something that doesn't change the validity of your identity, just a conversation.
Hi everyone, my name is Maisha. My pronouns are she, her, hers. For me, coming out is a journey, not a destination. So it doesn't have one purpose, but it's an internal reflection process.
Hi everyone, my name is Mel. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I think coming out to me in this moment means something that may be not visible to someone, but in that moment feels important enough to name for whatever reason.
My name is Kelsey. My pronouns are she and her. And coming out to me is a lifelong process. So it's not something that just ends the first time you do it. It's not something that only happens as a young person. It can happen at any age.
Hi everyone, my name is Abby, and I don't speak from personal experience, but I know I would have liked this if I had to come out, that no matter what the response, whether negative or positive, remember that you are loved, you matter, and you make the world a better place by merely existing. So you be you no matter what the response.
Hi everyone, my name is Michael. My pronouns are he, him, his. And for me, coming out is accepting who you are personally, because you have to come out to yourself first, and then allowing the people you love around you to understand who you are and all your interlocking personalities and identities.
Okay, so my name is Luisa. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and coming out to me is, I want to say malleable, and by malleable I mean that it's ever, like, you are constantly coming out for the rest of your life if that's something that you choose to do, and it doesn't always have to be in the same way or even the same identity that you come out with, and that's totally valid and okay, and you're allowed to change the way that you feel about yourself. So right now we're going to do, Annalise is going to lead us an activity about coming out and coming out statements.
All right, everybody, so we just finished our opening circle for the coming out session, and now we're going to move on to an activity. So in front of everybody, there's a card that has a statement about coming out on it and some examples. So what you're going to do is you're going to read out the card in front of you, and I'm going to call them alphabetically. So if you have card A, and I say A, you read card A. And then you are going to answer the two-parted question, what is the affirmative statement or the affirmative message in that card, the kind of like hidden meaning or not so hidden, and how does it make you feel? If you don't feel like you can find an affirmative message in it, that's okay. You can open it up to the rest of the group, and we'll open it up if anybody has anything to add after each statement. And you also don't have to answer how it makes you feel, but you can answer both parts of those questions. Any questions about the activity? Awesome. Okay, card A. Mel?
That's me. So I have coming out isn't just about being gay. So the affirmative message here could be that coming out is about more than just being gay or that one identity of being gay. And it makes me feel seen. It makes me feel that my experiences of coming out are included in the statement.
Awesome.
And does anyone have anything to add to that statement?
I think it's really interesting because, first of all, it kind of debunks this myth that people who are gay are the only ones who have to come out. But when we look at it from a perspective like of interlocking identities, obviously we have different social locations. So some people might come out as same gender loving. So you might be Black and you might be gay, and then that's the label, the identity that resonates with you. Or it could be Two-Spirit for people who are Indigenous and or sexual and gender minority. And I think it's really important to understand that sometimes it could take time to learn what those labels are and to see if they resonate with you or not, and try them on, and that's totally okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Card B.
So I got card B, and the statement is coming out isn't just about sexual orientation. And so I think the affirmative message in here is that it's not just sexual minorities that have to come out, it's also gender minorities who have to come out. And so as you can see on the card here, it says I'm genderqueer, I'm biromantic, I'm trans, or I'm intersex. And so this just makes me feel happy because I've myself personally had to come out as trans. So it's just reiterating that the queer community is a lot more diverse than just sexual minorities.
Does anyone have anything to add to that statement? I think I also wanted to expand on it a little bit as well, that coming out can even exist even outside of LGBTQ+ communities. It can be about anything. Mel had brought up in the opening statement. How did you word it again? It was something that people might not see about you, but is relevant to mention in the moment. So it's kind of it, yeah. So it can be about being from a single parent household, being from a different country, a lot of different things. All right, card C.
Hi everyone. My coming out statement is coming out is different for everyone, and the affirmative message is I cannot control other people's attitudes, beliefs, reactions, values, or the space that I'm in, but regardless of the reaction and response, it doesn't invalidate my coming out experience, so that's okay. And when I think about this affirmative statement, how does it make me feel? That maybe sometimes we might have regrets about coming out, but I think it's important for us to very intentionally exercise compassion, if we can, regardless of the outcome of coming out.
So with everyone having a different coming out story, I think it's important for youth to understand there isn't an urge, I'm speaking from experience, to go online, go on YouTube and look up coming out stories. As it became a few years ago, it was a big thing where it's celebrities who were in the LGBTQ+ community came out with they had their coming out story and things like that. And a lot of them are really positive, a lot of them not so positive, and I think that the message for youth coming out and struggling with how do I do this is that because it's different for everybody, you can't assess a celebrity's story, right? Because they, for example, have the financial means to leave whatever scenario they're in. Or it might have been amazing, but you're not assessing your own situation and your own surroundings, and it might not turn out the way that you had thought. So while it's good to see different stories, make sure that when you're thinking about your own experience that you are well prepared and thinking about your surroundings.
Also, kind of going off of Michael's point, it's important to remember that it doesn't do you any good as a queer person to compare your coming out experiences to another person's experiences, because everybody is in different contexts. You're surrounded by different people, you're in different environments, you have different backgrounds. So just because you're coming out went one way and someone you know is coming out went a different way, that doesn't make either one less real or less valid. They're both very real and very valid, and they're allowed to be different. There isn't like a cookie cutter way to come out.
Yeah, coming out has less to do with you and your identity and more to do with how the people around you handle themselves and their knowledge and their empathy. Yeah. Card D.
I think I was struggling with this a little because I'd say I'm in the dominant identity for this particular activity, and I started as I started reflecting on my statement, I started thinking of a world where things were completely different. What if people that had the dominant identity were in the minority group and they had to come out? So, I mean, that would be an interesting world, and so I'm trying to put myself in the position of someone that is really going through this experience, and as I do it, I feel like there would be multiple stages of being affirmative. So my statement is, you're never really done coming out, and the first little box is, I'm gay. Second box is, yep, I'm gay. This is my boyfriend, and yep, we're both gay. I feel like it depends on who you talk to. So maybe there's a friend, you're not sure how close the two of you are, so maybe you just want to tell him, you know, I'm gay. But then you have a sibling that you're really close to, and then you can say it with a lot more confidence. So I feel like there are stages of being affirmative, and you can be slightly less confident and still come out, and you can be really confident and still come out. And that's okay to be at different stages. You don't have to be really loud about it every time.
I think that card also has to do with understanding that like the systems and institutions we live in are constantly assuming heterosexual and cisgendered identities. So even if you've come out once, as Alicia was saying, you can't really do like a megaphone moment and everyone in the whole world knows for sure, and you're never going to have to mention that again. If you do want people to be aware of that identity, because of the way that the systems work right now, you have to continually point it out or bring it up, if that's what you want to do. Callie?
And I know we'll get a little more into this later, but the other thing too is like sometimes you're forced into a situation where you can't come out, and when you're then put in a situation where you can't come out and maybe happen to meet new people, then it's like if you care about them and you want them in your life, then it's like another conversation that you have to have. Mm-hmm. So it's like coming out is like this really complex beast where it's like it would be so much easier, I think, for the entire community if it was a one and done kind of moment. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And for some people, it can be hard because every time they get a new job, they have to come out. Or like for me, for example, I have to come out every time I start talking to someone as a potential new partner. And so it can be very exhausting. Yeah.
Something I'm thinking about when everyone's talking about this continuous experience of coming out is sometimes also, you know, you may come out to the people who care about you and you care about, but then the identity sort of falls into the background until something happens that, like, usually something bad happens, is what I'm saying, that links you to that identity that you had to come out for, and people forget that it impacts you differently because you share that identity. And so you have to come out again. Like sometimes I had to, you know, remind people like, this is why this is affecting me. Do you remember? This is what I told you about my identity, you know? And I think sometimes it's almost like the more that certain identities are assimilated into what we think is dominant culture, the more people forget that sometimes that salience really comes to the surface and it still hurts.
My statement E, coming out isn't all or nothing. So the example is, I've told my friends and some of my family at work, doesn't really come up there. And so the affirmative statement for me is that coming out is an individual choice that we can make based on our context. So we get to decide when we want to come out, and that choosing to not come out doesn't make you less queer, it doesn't make you less anything. It doesn't mean that you're ashamed of your identity or that you're scared or that there's something wrong. It's a personal choice that you get to make, and it recognizes that it may not be safe to do so because it isn't always safe to come out. And it recognizes that some people are not deserving of that information. It recognizes that, the librarian who's saying like some random comment and making an assumption about you may not need to know your identity, and like that's okay. You don't always have to be like, well, now I'm going to do my teachable moment, I'm going to disclose my identity, and like let's have this whole big situation. Sometimes like you get to make that choice of when you want to do it and not.
I think a concept that kind of goes hand in hand with that is once you do decide to come out to some people, to whoever, it is not on you to educate them. You are not in charge of their learning. If you are in the right mindset and this is a person you care about and you do want to help them, then obviously that is fully your choice. But as a queer person, you're not expected to teach people who don't know things if you are not in the right mindset to do so. So like coming out, for example, using the example that Kelsey said about the librarian, maybe you have a good relationship with her and she makes a homophobic comment and you're gay, it's not on you in that moment to educate her on why that comment wasn't okay and how it impacts you, because it also might not be a safe situation for you to do so.
Louisa?
I also think that that's actually a really important statement, because I think that in like the media and sometimes even with the people that you surround yourself with, like everyone expects you to like figure it out when you're a teenager or just like in your early years, but there are a lot of people that come out later on in life. So I think that it's okay, like in saying that it doesn't have to be all at once, it's just saying that it's okay that you're not ready and you don't have to come out if you don't feel ready to do so quite yet, even though you feel like everyone around you is coming out.
I also really like that card in particular because it feels like it takes the pressure off of me, that it's like, well, we don't talk about this aspect of my life. There was no point, like I didn't have to come out to you, I didn't have to tell you this because we've never talked about my dating life. So why would I tell you about that? But also that like me having to come out to you also means that you assumed about me. So while it's like my choice to tell you my identity, it's a two-way relationship. You made an assumption and now I'm educating you, and we both gotta keep moving from this. Yeah. F is next. Yeah. Had it in front of me.
Okay, so I have coming out statement F. Coming out can be a process. I think I'm gay. Actually, I'm bi. I don't know. I prefer queer. So to me, this kind of means that it can unfold over time. And there's not like a timeline in order to come to understand or make sense of your identities within yourself. So that intrapersonal kind of coming out. And there's no timeline with respect to potentially disclosing parts of your identity to others, whether it be a teacher, whether it be a colleague or a family member or someone in your peer group. I think that it's important that it's determined by you and it's your process in your journey alone, when you get to decide when you want to disclose things to others.
And I think Callie was talking about this before, about how like labels and understanding of yourself change with education and educational resources that you have access to. So if you don't know what all of the labels that exist in the community right now, what they all mean, you don't have the vocabulary to describe your identity. So as you learn about the vocabulary, as you meet new people that you might be interested in, that you hadn't been before, you find new labels and new ways that fit your understanding of yourself. And we let so many other parts of ourselves, like we don't know what career we want to be when we're in kindergarten. And we always like make jokes about like you wanted to be an astronaut when you were little or stuff like that. You also don't know entirely what your romantic identity is when you're young. So we leave room for that kind of growth, and we should leave room for that growth everywhere else too. Any other comments on that card? Oh, sorry, Manisha.
I think that, just building on to what Annalise said, that gender and sexual identity, they're fluid, they're developmental, and they evolve. And sometimes what I've seen is adults, whether educators, caregivers, professionals, sometimes don't understand or don't have adequate knowledge of the fluidity of gender and sexual identities. So when they see youth's response unfold over time, they tend to invalidate that response and coming out experience. So I think for me, that statement also reinforces the accountability and responsibilities that adults have to educate themselves about gender and sexual identities.
Anyone else? Oh, Alicia.
Yeah, so I think it's always really important to ensure that we are affording youth to be able to take the lead in terms of coming to understand themselves and expressing themselves and making sure that we're meeting them where they're at. So if they are going by this chosen name and these pronouns one day, understanding that if coming out is a process that can evolve and change, and as I said, meeting them where they're at, accepting and celebrating them in that moment, and using the terms and the names and the pronouns that they go by is really, really important.
Yeah. So the coming out statement that I have is, it can be risky to come out, even dangerous. I struggled a little bit to find an affirming statement with this, but I think that what this means to me is that even though sometimes I feel like coming out feels like you're doing it for other people, at the end of the day, it should always be about yourself. So when you do decide to come out, you have the right to feel safe and know that you're going to be okay regardless of the outcome. That's what that means to me. Yeah.
I think like in our society, we get caught up in this idea of like your identity is who you are, so you need to be proud of it. And I think like it's important to acknowledge that there are potentially dangerous situations where you can't come out, but that doesn't make your identity any less valid, or that doesn't make you any less gay or any less whatever, just because you're not telling every single person. And like, there are times where it's more important to look after your life than like your identity and who you are. And so I think like acknowledging that and knowing that like even though it might be painful in the moment, in the long run, your life is much more valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. So my card says, coming out is a personal choice. It says, my friends all know, I'm waiting, at least for now, I'm out to everyone, and I'm not telling my parents. And for me, this is powerful because this just kind of lets youth know that like it is kind of, when you're part of the queer community, for the most part, you're part of like a hidden minority. Whereas, if you have black skin, for example, you can't hide that. That is on you. That is your life. That is, everyone sees that, right? But as a gay man, I have the choice to kind of hide this if I need to, right? For staying safe, as we were saying in the past. So in my life, I chose not to choose to tell my grandparents for personal reasons, but everyone else in my life has known. But at the same time, I don't tell certain employers because I've worked in environments where it was a little bit more hostile and they were very openly homophobic, and so I felt outnumbered and things like that. So knowing like I have the choice to tell my friends and I have the choice to tell my parents, the youth, the people who are coming out, you have the choice. That's a very powerful thing to hold within yourself.
Just to add on that a little bit, I think that because of like being part of like the queer community, I think sometimes you feel like if you're not completely yourself and totally open, you're not really doing anything to better the like discrimination that people in the community face. And I think there's always this pressure to be as open as possible and be like unapologetically you. And I think that, like just like we were saying, like you don't have to do that. Even Callie said like there's sometimes if you don't feel safe and you know that you're not in a safe environment to do it, or you just might not want to, and that's totally okay as well.
So to add on to that as well, I feel like we're in an age where there was a large chunk of time in history where it was not okay to be part of the queer community, and we are in this transition, I guess, part of history where, we have pride parades, and we have GSAs, and we have laws put in place to protect the queer community. But we also know that there are certain pockets and people who are just not okay with that still, right? So we're in a transition period. So I think that kind of goes back to what we were saying with there's a trend of being like, I'm open, I'm proud of who I am, and you should be. But understanding that we are in a transition period where it's not always okay by other people, and that might cause you to be in a dangerous scenario, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess just being aware of that.
Okay, thank you everybody. Thank you for sharing, and we're going to move on to the closing circle and talk about advice and giving advice about coming out.
As a participant and facilitator, I think one of the strengths of this program is that you come into the room with one perspective and then you go out with 8 or 9 different perspectives. And in this activity, we actually saw how that happened, where we started off by sharing our perspective on what coming out means to us. And then in the activity, we saw that there were so many different ways to speak about this particular experience. And what I'm getting as a facilitator, and what I feel everyone else would get, is that the process of coming out is different for different people, and it feels different for different people. So in this closing circle, what I'd like each one of us to do is to share your best piece of advice for a young person that wants to come out. And would anyone want to get started? Michael?
So a piece of advice I'd give to a person coming out is to make sure that you have anybody that you're close to kind of be there as a support system, someone to talk to before the coming out process and after the coming out process, whether that means afterwards you need to vent to them or just share your experiences or maybe hopefully celebrate with them. Make sure that you have someone there to help you throughout the process.
So a piece of advice that I would give somebody that's coming out, if somebody's coming out for the first time, I think that I would say that you should take your time, do it once you feel ready. There's no rush in coming out. And if somebody has already been out and just coming out to somebody new, I always like to remind myself that it's important to remember that even though you feel like you're always constantly coming out and you're like, oh, this is the millionth time I've come out, it's the first time that specific person is hearing it from you. So it's also nice to maybe have patience and give people time to receive what you're saying.
I think the piece of advice that I would give to any young person wanting to come out is to be kind to yourself. There are so many things that you can't predict. There are so many things that are out of your control, and unfortunately, it probably won't go in this picture-perfect way that you have in your mind. So if are things that happen that you are not happy with, you have to be kind to yourself because it's not a reflection of you, and there's nothing wrong with the way that you come out.
I think it's really important for someone who's coming out to kind of understand what their limits are or what their boundaries are in terms of what they want to share with others. So it's perfectly within your right to share whatever you want. And if people ask you, for example, invasive questions, it's not their right to receive an answer. So for you to actually be firm on what you're going to share with them and the things that you won't share with them.
My piece of advice would be that regardless of who you come out to, when you come out, and how many people you come out to, it doesn't change how valid your identity is, and that your identity is dependent only on your understanding of it and your labeling of it.
My advice is actually for the listeners, people who are listening to others coming out. And my advice is be a decent human being. So to contextualize it, embody with your body and with your words compassion, validate, be accepting, and don't question it. Don't be intrusive, and they don't owe you any more explanations that they're comfortable providing you with.
If I can add to what Maisha said about the listener receiving, know that what you're receiving is a gift, and that, you know, sometimes when it's something that may be unfamiliar to you, you may take the privilege to make this like a philosophical or abstract, you know, examination of a thing that doesn't mean anything to you. And because you can make that separation between someone's very being and this identity that they're telling you about, like that's not the same for them. And so really think about the fact that this person is human, revealing more of their humanity to you in coming out.
My advice for someone coming out is that it doesn't have to happen immediately and sort of at 100%. You can sort of test the waters a little, and you can sort of gauge what you think their reaction would be by maybe saying like, oh, what do you think about queer issues these days? Or, oh, have you seen that TV show The L Word? What do you think about that? To sort of see their reaction and sort of maybe get a sense of whether they would be a safe person that can accept that gift that you're willing to give them.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. And with that, we come to the end of this session.